Good morning, everybody. Welcome to our press conference on how algorithms help spread misinformation. We will go ahead and start here. Dr. Pan is going to lead off, and then at the end of the press conference, we'll take questions and use the raise the hand feature for that. Dr. Pan.
Right. Well, thank you all for joining us today. I'm Dr. Richard Pan. I'm a pediatrician, and I'm proud to represent the Sacramento region in the California State Senate. I also chair the Senate Committee on Health and lead the Asian Pacific Islander Legislative Caucus. Now, I'm pleased to be joined today by Imran Ahmed from the Center for Countering Digital Hate. And the Center for Countering Digital Hate is doing important work exposing and disrupting the architecture of online hate and misinformation. And he will be sharing the center's research on the role social media plays in promoting hate and misinformation. But before I begin my remarks, I also just want to recognize, because I just came from the Senate floor where we recognize today's Holocaust Remembrance Day. And Holocaust survivors, actually the theme for this year today is it started with words. And so we think about, as we remember the Holocaust, as they said, it started with words. And in fact, Holocaust survivor Elie Wiesel talked about the importance of taking sides. We must always take sides, he said. Sometimes we must interfere. Neutrality helps the oppressor, never the victim. And so as we discuss today the issues around social media, I did just want to, because today is Holocaust Remembrance Day, is to remind us of a little bit of the history of words, even prior to the advent of our technology, but the power of the words, and of course with technology, the images that go with those words. So today, I do want to discuss some of the critical problems affecting the lives of Americans today. So we're in the midst of a pandemic. The novel coronavirus has killed over 550,000 Americans, with over 30 million Americans infected in a little over a year. In fact, a study that was just published, I think maybe just yesterday or just a couple of days ago, found that 1/3 of people with COVID-19 will be diagnosed with a neurologic or psychiatric problem in the 6 months after infection. So with 30 million Americans already having been infected over the past year, that represents 10 million Americans potentially developing brain-related complications after COVID-19 infection. So this is a serious issue. But yet, misinformation and politicization of America's COVID response has resulted in inconsistent use of effective public health measures to slow the spread of the coronavirus, which has now resulted in us basically looking to vaccination as the primary means of controlling this pandemic. Yet, even during the pandemic, social media companies have optimized feeds for engagement at the expense of promoting misinformation and division. Reporters have found that right-wing posts with misinformation spread much more rapidly by social media than right-wing posts without misinformation. So it's not about the ideology, it's about the misinformation. Facebook's own research showed that 2/3 of all extremist group joins are due to Facebook's own recommendations. So they weren't seeking to join, they were recommended it by Facebook, 2/3 to join the extremist groups. And Facebook actually chose to undermine efforts to reduce the spread of hateful and damaging content because executives believed that this contributed to an anti-conservative bias. So the algorithm weren't about ideology again, but because they felt that there was an anti-conservative bias, that hate and damaging content was okay. Now, how did I get into this space? Well, even though I'm in politics, I'm a pediatrician and I'm about public health. And in fact, in 2015, I authored a law to increase vaccination rates as measles spread across Disneyland, across our state and country. However, as I was doing that work, I began to recognize how social media spread anti-vaccine myths and enabled personal attacks on public health advocates who are trying to spread accurate information. One example is I had a colleague of mine, a fellow pediatrician, sent me a YouTube video on vaccinations. And the YouTube algorithm recommended immediately afterwards 3 videos with vaccine misinformation or anti-vaccine videos, which actually automatically played after I watched the video that I got from my friend. I've also witnessed how online misinformation and hate became real life hate and even violence. In fact, in 2019, as the anti-vaccine extremists were putting out violent memes, I was actually assaulted on the street by an anti-vaccine extremist who live streamed the assault on Facebook. So notice he's doing this as performance, on Facebook because to help boost his social media, to the adulation of his followers. And when we asked Facebook to take it down, they refused. Now, as we go back, think about COVID, we need to get high rates of COVID vaccinations in order to finally control this pandemic. And while right now, it's certainly very excited, we fully vaccinated about a fifth of Americans, another fifth have received their first dose. But we also know approximately a quarter of Americans have reported they will refuse the COVID vaccine. Thus, we're going to fall short of the 80 to 85% vaccination rate we need to control the coronavirus, especially since it's not even approved for children yet. So that's about 20% of our population right there. You add another 20% who, 25% who say they won't get the vaccine. We're not going to get there. And unfortunately, many of the people who are refusing the vaccine have false fears of the vaccine, or they do not believe in the seriousness of the virus, which is part of the reason I had started with explaining how serious it is. And unfortunately, a major source of misinformation about COVID and the vaccine is social media. And while I certainly have seen that social media companies like Facebook have repeatedly made press announcements saying they're eliminating or limiting vaccine misinformation on their platforms, accounts posting anti-vaccine content have dramatically increased the number of followers during the pandemic. In fact, MIT Technology Review recently published an article reporting that Facebook executives blocked a medical information detector that reduced the reach of anti-vaccine campaigns. In fact, it's been repeatedly reported that Facebook executives repeatedly prioritize increasing engagement, which of course fuels their advertising profits, over harm reduction. Social media algorithms prioritize engagement over truth and allows division and hate in the name of ideological balance is destroying our health and our democracy. And while my public health advocacy has led me to address the dangers of social media algorithms optimized for engagement, also in my role as chair of the Asian Pacific Islander Legislative Caucus, I also must mention how hate has led to violence and murders of Asian Americans. And just as in anti-vaccine extremism, online hate and violence becomes real-life violence. Research shows that current social media algorithms, again, optimized for engagement, often give hate a megaphone. And therefore, I am authoring SB 642 to hold social media corporations accountable for the content the corporation recommends to users through their algorithms. With rights comes responsibilities, and all of you in the press, so newspapers, TV, and radio, can be held accountable for harms caused by their editorial decisions and policies. And I think many of you here know that. So why should social media corporations be different? What you see in your social media feed, including advertisements and recommended posts and groups, are a result of algorithms and content moderation decisions made by those corporate executives. They should be held accountable for these decisions, especially when people are harmed or injured or even killed. We should have a level playing field for all media with accountability. And with that, I'd like to now introduce Imran Ahmed with the Center for Countering Digital Hate, who will talk about his organization and their work on algorithmic promotion and misinformation. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Senator Pan. Hello, my name is Imran Ahmed. I'm the Chief Executive of the Center for Countering Digital Hate, a US and UK nonprofit NGO that looks at the networks, the individuals responsible for producing and distributing misinformation and identity-based hate, and the way in which platforms and these bad actors interact and actually bolster each other, both profiting from the content that they're producing. One of the challenges that we've had over the last year is trying to work out, well, who is best placed to exploit the opportunities created by coronavirus. And we've seen three sets of folks come forward and really take advantage of the COVID crisis to profiteer. One is hate actors, that we've seen a proliferation of identity-based hate in the last year. The second are fringe COVID deniers, science deniers, sort of the counter-enlightenment in human form. And the third are anti-vaxxers. And the anti-vax industry, which we've been studying for 2 years now, is really a very small number of quite sophisticated organizations fronted by usually one individual, which produce and mass distribute content that undermines public confidence in either the safety of vaccines or the dangers of coronavirus, measles, or whatever disease they happen to have decided that they're going to target and exploit this time round. And all of that is to undermine faith in medicine and in doctors so that they can get their hooks in them. There is a reason why they operate. They mainly operate so they can sell their own false cures. And our work has been to expose the profiteering behind the anti-vaccine industry and to disrupt their work by persuading social media companies in particular, who until now have allowed them to operate with impunity on their platforms and grow their audiences, to take action against them. When I say grow their audiences, let me give you a sense of the scale of what we're looking at here. The anti-vax industry, the small coterie of anti-vaxxers, they have 58 million followers across the US and UK. So 54 million just in the US. They just 10 individuals account for half of those followers. And most recently, we put out a report which was cited in the House Energy and Commerce Committee. 12 attorneys general wrote to Facebook about it, and YouTube, and Senator Mark Warner as well, which showed that 12 individuals are responsible for 65% of all the shares of misinformation about vaccines online. So this tiny industry is enormous in scale. And we know that it has an asymmetrical task as well. Whereas people like Dr. Pan and the and doctors have to get people to, as we, get off their bums, get off the sofa, go and get vaccinated. All the anti-vax industry have to do is to dissuade people, to inject enough doubt so that people hesitate. And they have led to this crisis that we have in vaccine hesitancy in the United States, and we're seeing around the world as well. And what makes it more pernicious is that whereas normally when social media companies see malignant content, they will just pump out the old excuse, to combat bad information, you should put out good information. What we've discovered through our most recent report, Malgorithm, is that that's not enough, because the playing field isn't level. What we discovered in that report was that people who are following just wellness accounts, yoga accounts, just your general health stuff, they were being fed actively anti-vaccine misinformation, so that they weren't following already. This is a study of Instagram's algorithm, which is the same algorithm that Facebook uses, and that they were being deepened and brought into more radical, extreme ways of thinking about health and about vaccines. But then once they were being exposed to anti-vax content and they started following it, they were being fed even more conspiracist content, like anti-Semitism, like QAnon, like election misinformation. And this all happened in August 2020 when the pandemic was raging. The liability that lies with the social media companies for that, and the moral opprobrium that we should rightly place upon them as societies, I think is encapsulated in this bill, which really seeks to hold them accountable for their failures to act when they fail to take down misinformation. That is very, very dangerous, and fail to act against this industry that still proliferates on their platforms, but also their active encouragement of the distribution and visibility of misinformation that very, very simply puts not just the individual at risk, but their families, their communities, and national security as a whole.
Thank you so much. So I think at this point, we'd be happy to take questions. So I guess use the raise your hand feature. Shannon, did you want to talk about taking questions?
Yeah, exactly. If anybody has any questions, just please use the raise a hand feature and we'll unmute you. Not seeing anybody at this point.
Okay. Well, I think I thank everyone for being here today. This, certainly this issue is extremely important for public health, battling this pandemic, but obviously it has broader implications. I think it was mentioned that not only do the algorithms feed people perhaps anti-vaccine misinformation if they're in wellness groups and mommy groups and so forth, it then broadens out and into other forms of whether it's extremism or hate as well. And that's something that is that we're trying to address as well. And in many ways, we need to really think about the fact that, for example, a Pew poll showed that more people get their news from social media than get from print newspapers. So sorry for the print newspaper people here, but this is a major source of information for people. And if the algorithms that are driving your news feed, so your news feed that when you look at your social media account, what you see on there is not your choice necessarily, as much as the social media companies may say. They're driven by algorithms that have been optimized for engagement, and optimized for engagement in a way that does not take account of potential harms. I guess one potential analogy, it's not a perfect one, is that we're not trying to ban social media any more than we want to ban a car. But imagine having a car that doesn't have brakes because it would slow the car down, or the weight of the brake system would make it more expensive or less profitable to sell the car. Would we, as the public, find it acceptable that those types of vehicles are on our streets? I think we would not. And so we need to really think about, the role these social media algorithms play, how corporate decisions and policies choose which algorithms and what kind of protections these algorithms have for the public, and to minimize harm and injury, and what we should be doing to ensure that that we protect the public and our democracy. So again, I really appreciate you being here. And I don't know, Mr. Ahmed, do you want to make any closing remarks before we close out?
No, just to say thank you so much for your leadership on this issue. It is absolutely vital, and we can see that this is the first, that, as far as I can see, state-led initiative to really take the social medias to task for their particular for their liability in worsening the pandemic and spreading misinformation about vaccines. But this is something that we know that legislatures around the world are looking to do as well. And there are a number of different models. This is a really important contribution to our collective ability to hold these companies to account for the harms they're creating.
Okay. All right. Well, thank you all for being here. And if you have any follow-up questions later on, please follow up with Shannon. And again, I want to thank you so much for your interest, and we look forward to continuing to update you on our work and what's happening with SB 642. Thank you so very much.